Thank you for joining us for episode 107 of North Star's Private Equity Fast Pitch. Our host, Jeff Henningsen, president of Lockton Companies in Texas, will be speaking with Brandon Knapp, the founder and managing director of Evercap Advisors. Brandon works to develop strategy, leads business development, and manages Evercap's proprietary deal processes. Prior to founding Evercap, Brandon was a managing director at Crutchfield Capital, a Houston-based investment banking firm focused on M&A advisory. Brandon has successfully completed numerous middle-market merger and acquisition and recapitalization transactions in the software, technology-enabled business services, industrial services, and distribution industries. Today they'll be discussing how leading with value is the best way to start a professional relationship, how Gen Z has both advantages and disadvantages in the hybrid work environment, and how ping pong skills lead to a successful deal. And now your host, the podfather of private equity, Jeff Henningsen.
Brandon, I'm super excited about this podcast today. There's so many similarities to, I think, what you care about and your passions and what I've had as a passion my entire career. So we'll dive into that a little bit later once you introduce yourself. So why don't you get us kicked off, tell us a little bit about your firm, yourself, your career path, and then we'll get into some various areas.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Well, to kick things off, first, I'd like to say that I'm a big time listener of your podcast. I think I've listened to every single episode so far. Appreciate you having me on today. And it's always great learning about the other private equity guests and investment bankers and other types of professionals that you've had on. And I think it's beneficial just to the community at large to learn about those firms, their strategies and operation. A little bit about myself. I am the founder and managing director of Evercap Advisors. We're a middle market investment banking firm dedicated to sourcing proprietary M&A deals for both private equity groups and other types of strategic acquirers. Prior to founding Evercap, I was managing director at Crutchfield Capital. They're a Houston-based investment banking firm dedicated mostly to M&A advisory services. And then regarding my background in education, I'm an Aggie, graduated from Texas A&M with a finance degree, and also had a chance to do a few internships during my time there. Would be happy to touch on those experiences if that's something your audience would benefit from.
Why don't we start with what your firm focuses on, because it's buy-side representation. Could you, for the listeners that may not be as deeply familiar with that, give a little overview of what that means compared to sell-side representation in the investment banking world?
Yeah, be happy to. The traditional approach is for a business owner when they're looking to do some sort of transaction would be to go with a sell-side investment banking process. So to give an overview of what that typically looks like is, let's say a founder is 60 years old. Maybe he founded the business when he was 40. So he's been doing it 20 years. He wants to sell the business. It's a large business now, or medium-sized business, 50 million revenue, let's say 5 million of EBITDA. And he's never sold a business before. What he does is he hires a sell-side investment bank who will make a variety of materials for him, including a SIM and teaser documents, and distribute that to a lot of potential buyers. So sometimes up to 100, sometimes even over 100 potential buyers. And then the investment banker will help that owner negotiate, close, and finish a transaction. The benefits of hiring a sell-side investment banker is that it's a very competitive process. But if you're a private equity firm, it's tough because you're only 1 out of 100 potential buyers. Often it's the highest bidder that wins. Sometimes if there's another factor that can help the private equity firm stand out. The other issue is it's a very reactive process. So you're waiting for someone to come to market. So what a buy-side advisor does, which is different from the sell side, is instead of representing the seller, we're investment bankers that represent the buyer. And so we take a proactive approach. What that looks like to us is we work with private equity groups and strategic acquirers in understanding what their M&A goals are. And it works really well when there's a large amount of potential targets that would fit with their acquisition or investment criteria. So the other side is that it's a proactive process, what we do. So we make a list of all the companies that would fit their investment or acquisition criteria. And then we reach out proactively to those companies to try to set up one-on-one discussions. And so those discussions lead to a more streamlined process. The valuation is more reasonable. But with that being said, it's not a bad deal for sellers either, because the seller doesn't have to pay any fees. They don't have to talk to hundreds of buyers. They just have to talk to one. And at Evercap, we work with really leading private equity groups and other types of buyers that have a lot of references and strong track records. We feel like we're soliciting or talking to business owners and pairing them with basically the top firms in the industry.
This isn't your first experience in buy-side type work. At Crutchfield, you did that as well.
Exactly. You're right. Crutchfield was doing about half buy-side, half sell-side, and I was on the buy-side team over there. So it's a similar type of process.
Crutchfield, just a quick plug shout out, but JB Dollison and I go way back, and great firm, great people there, have a lot of time for them. And JB and I think it was probably 19 years ago, started the Texas ACG Capital Connection together along with Colt Ludy, which was fun. Tell me a little bit about your career path, how you got to Crutchfield, and then we'll transition. I'd love to hear about how you started your firm.
Going back to the college days, like I said, I went to A&M. I was on track to graduate in 3 years because I wanted to get started working as soon as possible, but quickly realized I didn't know what I wanted to do as that 3 years approached. So what I did at my senior year, I took a year and a half off. And it was kind of to delay my graduation, figure out what I wanted to do. So I did 3 internships and a study abroad, all back to back, to kind of learn different areas and buy time. And so through that experience, really decided that I wanted to work in investment banking. And particularly, I narrowed it down to I wanted to be a generalist, at least early in my career, as far as industries are concerned. Regarding size, I wanted to be in the middle market. And then the type of work I wanted to do was M&A-focused. I was looking at different investment banks that fit those 3 criteria, and Crutchfield was one of them, and reached out to Rick Wilson, who's at a firm, and asked him if I could apply early for the position. He said I could, so I applied early and got the offer just about a week later. That's how I ended up at Crutchfield. Had been there about 6 years before starting Evercap.
Tell me about starting Evercap. It had to be super exhilarating, super exciting, but also potentially some stress around that. What are the things that surprised you and maybe right to plan?
I guess the shocking thing for everyone else was that I wanted to start Evercap. Since I was a managing director at Crutchfield, it's a great team doing the type of work that I wanted to do. That surprised others that I would leave to start my own. But I guess the biggest surprise so far has just been how supportive my old partner at Crutchfield, Eric Rodiger, has been. He was a mentor to me at Crutchfield, but as another investment bank that does similar services, we could be viewed as competitors, but he doesn't view it that way and has continued to mentor and guide me. So I think that part is, I don't know if necessarily surprising the right word, but is definitely uplifting.
Well, I think it speaks a lot to who you are as a person when folks leave their employer and their mentor, and that mentor and that employer want to continue to help you be successful. Says a lot about you. And something we talk a lot about with people that I mentor is that you may have an amazing opportunity down the road, whether it's to start your own firm or to leave to go to somewhere else, and how you work and operate within the current job that you're in really will set you up for future things in your career. And life is, it's a very small community in the private equity investment banking world. The better you treat everybody along the way, the better it'll be long term.
Yeah, it really is a small world, which makes reputation and trust important.
So you launch your firm, you're in Austin, Texas, you're an Aggie, and now you're employing college students from UT. How does that feel?
At first, it was a difficult pill to swallow. We do hire Aggies as well, but a lot of our employees do come from UT, and it's just an excellent school. It's a top investment banking feeder school. And we really get the best and brightest from the school. And the strategy there is we get them when they're younger. So typically sophomores before they go to the bulge bracket internships or go to a management consulting big three type of internship.
And when we were prepping for the call, you shared some really interesting things about how smart these college students are. And are you surprised at the things that they're able to do? And maybe even can you give me an example, or the audience an example of some of the things that they've done that really show the strength of giving young people opportunities to work in scenarios like you're giving them?
Yeah, I've definitely been shocked because what I do is rewind rather to when I was in their shoes, and they're much sharper than I was, much more equipped and just frankly prepared for an internship. But yeah, they've been able to really take the bull by the horns, and we give them as much responsibility as they can handle. Even at the internship level, we have our CRM was chosen and basically implemented by one of our interns, and he knows how to do some coding as well. So we have a lot of custom configurations courtesy of him. And it's just been a really beneficial process, I think, for both parties to have them able to take on so much. And it makes them very excited as well. Most of the interns continue on to do a second internship with us because they get to do so much and have a big impact.
What's your view on what young folks in that position coming right out of college are wanting in a job? Because obviously COVID kind of highlighted maybe the needs of that generation coming up. And we talked about that a little bit. What are you seeing they're looking for?
I see a lot of them wanting flexibility regarding in-person versus remote. So a lot of them like the hybrid type work environment, which is unique even to those who are 5-10 years older than them. A lot of people my age and older want to be working in the office, but they really appreciate the remote work. The hour flexibility is also something that they seem to like. So I can't tell you how many emails I get from them at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. So a lot of them like working really late and then sleeping in. So they like working stranger hours. But I think it's mainly the opportunity to prove their value. So they seem very hungry, and that could be different across Gen Z as a whole. But for those who are very motivated and looking to get into a high horsepower industry like investment banking, they really want to prove themselves. So they're eager to do a lot of work and be given a lot of responsibility. And what I see is a lot of them asking for more and being proactive with their projects, saying, hey, I did this basic task, but can I go one step deeper or one step higher in that process and do the next level type of work as well? And then the answer is yes. And they handle it until they need to bring in some help.
You just went through the last however many years, 6-7 years of an apprenticeship, if you will, with Eric at Crutchfield, where you probably sat in the same office and within earshot, and you learn a lot just by being around a mentor. And now with the next generation wanting to work remote, have flexible hours, not be in the same space as the person they work for.
Right.
How do you envision that next generation getting the types of driplets of information that you got by sitting next to Eric?
It's tough, and I don't think they will get the same driplets of information. So I think that's something that myself personally at Evercap and the industry at large needs to help solve for. But one way is to just include them on all the calls that they can be on. So anytime I'm speaking with a service provider or a business owner, a client, I try to have at least 1 or 2 interns on the call so they can hear those discussions. But I think there's no replacement from being in the office and having those quick 2-minute conversations as people are passing by or hearing through the wall. I know I could hear through Eric's wall, so I could eavesdrop on a lot of his conversations. So I think that learning by osmosis is just lacking with these virtual environments. So hopefully the hybrid environments can help with that, but it's definitely a challenge.
Well, this is probably a great segue. Advice to young professionals and college students, which you get to interact with a lot. What advice are you giving them, or would you give them in this area if they want to go into private equity or investment banking?
Whatever they can do to hone the verbal and written communication skills. is what I would recommend to them. So they seem to be very sharp with the financial knowledge, with the modeling skills. Even what I'm seeing more and more of is them getting MIS minors or computer science minors. So they're able to help leverage data tools in Excel to make themselves more productive in their finance efforts, but they still need to communicate what those findings are and communicate the models and other information. So anything they can do on that regard is what I would recommend to them. And then just general advice I would give to them is leading with value. And this kind of ties in with the communication skills, but I have a lot of younger folks reaching out, asking for 30 minutes of my time, and the email's not spelled right, and it's got different fonts, and it just doesn't come across too well. So what I always encourage them to do is try to think of a way that you could add value to whoever you're reaching out to and whoever you're making a request from. And so for private equity, for example, maybe you could reach out to a private equity group and say, here's an idea of a website improvement or a relevant news article I found that I thought would be relevant to one of your portfolio companies, or even going as far as making a list of companies with contact information of, hey, have you guys thought of these as potential investment or acquisition targets? So I think someone who leads with value and communicates clearly would really get a lot of potential employers' attention.
I think you hit on something really relevant and something that I talk a lot about with my peers who are almost twice your age. But I was with a head of an investment banking group about 3 years ago, just right before COVID. And they were interviewing all their summer interns who were coming in and out of the office. We happened to share an elevator bank, and we stopped and talked. And he made the comment in line with what you just said, is that everybody who's walking through the door is highly qualified to do spreadsheets and analysis and write up reports. But the ones that will separate from doing that for the rest of their life and maybe leading a team or maybe running an investment bank is all soft skills.
Agreed. Those skills are very important for moving up in any organization.
So how did you address that in your life?
I think a lot of it was just through the nature of my work. Well, the leading with value and just written skills, I think I have some of that innately, and through just middle school and high school, I've been a good writer. But as far as honing the verbal communication skills, speaking with business owners on the phone or pitching or negotiating, a lot of that I learned on the job. Some of it was through my internships, but a lot of it was just on the job training of getting those reps in time after time. And one thing that I did to kind of earn the right to do those reps, because my old boss would not let me speak with business owners unless I was qualified to do so, would be to write out scripts and take notes. So I would take notes of how conversations would flow. When would people pause in the conversation to allow the other person to speak? And then what kind of intros and transitions would they use? So I would take those notes and rehearse them on walks and basically talk to myself on walks to get some reps in. So when I did have the chance, I could come across clearly and concisely. So I think that preparation work helped a lot to position myself to be in positions where I had the opportunity to speak in a more real live environment.
I'm going to add to that. It's interesting in today's Zoom and video world, it's not too hard to record yourself and get that playbook, if you will, or be able to watch game film of how you spoke, how you looked at the camera, how you position yourself. And I even have found doing over 100 podcast episodes that my verbiage has improved significantly because I'm editing myself and listening to my filler words in the early days and saying, wow, I need to stop that. So many people are afraid to listen to themselves, but actually that helps you improve. I'd love for you to share with the audience your story about your parents. In our preparation, you were talking about how they both lost jobs due to acquisition and M&A transactions.
Yeah. So I call my dad a victim of M&A in a way, but his firm was acquired by another firm and they let his entire division go. And so they weren't really thinking about the employees in the best light, I don't think. That's one of the reasons that we relocated when I was in high school, was because my dad's firm got bought out, if you will. And then my mom has had some challenges on her end too, but I think hers haven't been as bad, but she works at a gym and they've gone through a number of mergers or acquisitions, and it's just always an adjustment period. But I think those have worked out a little bit better for her. But there's always just adjustments to take into account. So it's interesting to see it on the employee side. And that's one of the reasons why I founded Evercap, was to prioritize employees of these acquired companies.
Well, that's where I was leading you, is I know that that's one of the main core focuses of your firm, is helping your buyers focus on putting the employees at the center of an M&A transaction and really sharing the passion with the seller for taking care of those associates, right?
Exactly. So there's two core principles behind the founding of Evercap. And one of them is what, like you mentioned, putting employees at the center of M&A. To elaborate on that on a personal note, I'm the oldest brother of three, and being a leader to them has always been important to me. So they're both in the military now and are leaders in their own right, but I still have that need to develop and lead those around me. I know you're a previous athlete playing quarterback for Mizzou, and for a sports analogy, I view myself as a retired quarterback who's transitioning now into a coach role. What I get satisfaction from rather is not have been being a good quarterback, but by developing the next quarterback to be much better than I ever was. Tying it all back to M&A, we see that in two ways. One, I want Evercap's employees to be at the center of M&A transactions. So like we were discussing, giving them a lot of opportunity, equipping them with the resources that they need to be successful, and then really rewarding those efforts generously. And on the second part, like we were talking about with my parents, was for the companies that the private equity firm or strategic acquirers are investing in or buying, that they prioritize the employees of those firms. I think it's really helpful when buyers do that, because that's what the selling owner really cares about, even more than price. Is I get the question all the time, what's going to happen to my employees? So working with buyers who've really thought through that question and are trying to position those employees for success is really motivating to me.
We talked about mentorship, and love for you to transition into, we've talked a little bit about your family as well. You said your dad is your mentor. Tell us a little bit about your experience there. And you shared a childhood story, which I think is fantastic and probably one of the core DNA drivers of your DNA now. A lot of it comes from our parents, but I think your parents sound like they were incredible mentors to you.
They definitely were. My dad and my mom, both very strong mentors, and my dad's my best friends. One of the lessons, he's taught me a lot of lessons, but one of them is to just think on my own. So he's always let us make our own decision with sports. If we wanted to play baseball, we'd play baseball. If we wanted to switch after a year to something else, we'd switch to something else. If we didn't want to play sports, that was fine too. He gave us space to make our own decisions. And one funny story that he did when we were little, when I say we, my little brothers and I, we're probably 3, 4, and 5. We're all very close in age. But he put a marshmallow on the bed, and we call it the marshmallow test. And he put us in there for 5 minutes alone and said, you can either eat the marshmallow or you can wait 5 minutes. And if you wait, you get 2 marshmallows. And so we didn't get a lot of sweets growing up. So a marshmallow was a pretty big reward for us. And both my little brothers ate their marshmallows, but I waited and was rewarded with the second marshmallow. It's kind of a funny aside test, but my dad was always thinking of incentives too, which helps when you're structuring deals, just to have that mindset of what's motivating people. And then delayed gratification is just, I think, an overall tenet of success. If you're able to wait, you can get more later. And so having those lessons ingrained as a child from other areas as well is very beneficial.
I don't know if I've asked any of my guests what I'm going to ask you now, but I always ask the question, do you have any favorite quotes or mottos, or what gets you up in the morning, makes you excited to get the day going? But I'd love to ask that. Plus, did your dad have any that he used that you remember that kind of resonate?
I don't think my dad's as much of a quote guy, but I love quotes. I've got a lot that I think about, and I've got a whole list of quotes that I like, and I memorize quite a few of them for motivation. But one that I have been thinking about recently is, the man who loves walking will walk further than the man who loves the destination. So that's what I've been thinking about more as I've started Evercap and just enjoying the process of where we are now in the building phase and trying to enjoy this stage of the process instead of just rushing to how many deals can we close in as soon as possible.
Absolutely love that one. I'm writing it down, and it's never been used. I've never even heard that one before. That's a really, really deep one that I like a lot.
And one more that I'd like to share too is actually one from a previous professor at A&M, General Van Alstyne is his name. He's a retired three-star general from the Army. And whenever he spoke, everyone listened. One of his favorite quotes was, if you want something, ask for it. If they don't want to give it to you, they'll tell you no. And I like it because it's just so simple. But a lot of times people just don't ask for something. Like we were talking about earlier, there's a right way to ask. And if you're able to ask when adding value to someone as well, I think that's the best way to do it. But a lot of times just asking will position yourself for success.
It's always no unless you ask.
Yes, that's another great way to put it.
So, Brandon, you talked about one of the principles of your firm. I think there's got to be another one. If you said there was one, what's your second principle?
So the second one is persisting until the right deal is found. Right now, we're in a very crowded M&A environment. There's a lot of dry powder out there. I think the most recent number is $975 billion in the US private equity pool alone. Evercap helps our clients compete by helping them find and invest in companies that fit their investment parameters outside of those traditional sell-side processes. So it's really motivating for me to work hard for them and structure these win-win-win deals is what I call them, where the private equity firm wins through our persistence, but the business owner also wins by getting liquidity for his business in a successful transaction, and the employees winning with an opportunity to grow with the firm as it expands.
And speaking of competition, I know you shared with me a story that I think the audience would love to hear about a competition that resulted in a deal for you.
Yeah, happy to share that one. So the backstory is that we were working with a private equity portfolio company client, and they had a very strategic acquisition in mind. And so they thought that the owner would be very intrigued with their offer, but we just couldn't get a hold of them to even entertain the offer. So it was my job to get a hold of them. I was calling, emailing, sending LinkedIn messages, looking through our network to see if we could find a mutual connection. Nothing was having any success. We had the idea that we didn't live too far from the company's headquarters. I threw on a suit and drove to the building to see if I could speak with the owner just by walking straight into his office. So I was stopped by the receptionist and a couple people who were playing ping pong behind the receptionist. And I was seeing if I could drop off a package, which was a pitch deck that was explaining the deal, but we're not allowed to say that since these are confidential things. So I was just asking to drop this deck off on the owner's desk, and they were hesitant to do so and weren't really warm to the idea. So I asked the two guys playing ping pong if I challenged them and said, hey, if I beat the better of your two players, please let me just put this on the desk of the owner. And they were both sales guys, and they thought that was a funny idea. So I played the better of the two. I'm a good ping pong player since my grandpa trained me from a young age. And so I won the match and was able to put the investment deck on the owner's desk. He took a look at it, finally gave me a call back, and we actually ended up closing that deal 2 months later. So I call it my ping pong persistence story.
I love that. That is fantastic. That reminds me so much of that Ted Lasso episode where he was throwing darts with the wrong hand and then switched to beat the old owner, which was fantastic and shows such great strategy and intuition and also fun, right? I mean, every day needs to be fun, and that's an amazing way to build a little fun in your life, to challenge somebody to something that is way outside the realm of what you would think would get you in the door at a company.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a fun story for me and fun story for them and the owner as well. It's nice when business isn't just all work, but you combine it with fun and just not make it as serious as it shouldn't have to be.
This has been a great episode, and I think our audience is going to very much enjoy it. And I have a lot of guests on my podcast who I've known for 20 plus years, and they're in their late 40s and early 50s. And I saw this as a great opportunity to highlight somebody who's an up-and-comer, who's taking risk and really doing some amazing things, not only in what you do as an investment banker, but also really taking care of and motivating and inspiring the next generation and giving them opportunities. And so I've really enjoyed this. My last question is if I'm a potential client of yours and I'm trying to decide whether to engage you, what are the leave behind things you want me to remember tonight as I'm trying to make that decision?
Thanks for the question. What I'd say is, in a crowded M&A market, Evercap Advisors persists until the right deal is found. And for the right deal, we're talking about the right company, the right price, the right fit. And we're able to do that through our experience, our process, with it being completely dedicated to sourcing these proprietary deals. And then probably most importantly, our philosophy of putting employees first and persisting until the right deal is found. So really appreciate the time, Jeff. And if I could end it with a quote tying back to Crutchfield, is M&A is a team sport. And JB Dawson would say that all the time from Crutchfield. Really, the kudos goes to the team.
That's awesome. I love it. Great ending, and really appreciate your time. And we'll be following your career and watching you, I'm sure, be very, very successful.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you for listening to North Star's Private Equity Fast Pitch. For more information about Fast Pitch or North Star's boutique heavy hitter events, you can visit us at enorthstar.com.